Welcome to Inks for Starters with Alexa Von Tobel. I'm Alexa, a serial entrepreneur myself and founder and managing partner of Inspired Capital, a venture firm that backs fearless founders who are solving some of the biggest challenges facing humanity. Now in our 6th season, we sit down each week with one of the best founders on the planet to hear their story of guts, inspiration, and drive. Let's dive right in. Hi, everybody. I'm your host, Alexa Von Tobel, and this week I'm excited for you to meet Sarah Harrelson, founder and editor-in-chief of Cultured magazine. Sarah founded Cultured in 2011 as a definition-defined publication that seeks to break down the borders between creative disciplines and showcase the complexities of the art ecosystem. Cultured has become a trusted compass for fashion, art, design, and architecture, consistently springboarding young voices into the conversation through thought-provoking coverage. Sarah curates and produces events each year for the leading fashion houses, luxury brands, and galleries. Her brand is unmatched, and her art collection focused on emerging artists has been featured by the New York Times and ArtNet. Sarah has decades-long of careers in magazines, beginning with an internship at Elle, including launching the Miami Herald home and design section, becoming editor-in-chief of Ocean Drive and Art Basel magazine, and ultimately founding her own publishing company. Sarah holds a degree in political science from NYU. She lives in Los Angeles with her husband and has 3 children. Most importantly, she's become a friend, and I'm excited to have somebody of a totally different background on today. And with that, let's welcome Sarah. First of all, Sarah, it has been so fun getting to know you, and I'm excited to have you on today because you are one of the more unique guests. Typically, we have huge tech founders building multi-billion-dollar businesses that have gone public. You built a magazine. Let's go back. First things first, what is Cultured Magazine in your own words? And let's talk a little bit about the aha moment and why did you launch a magazine in 2011 in the face of media going through disruption? Tell us.
First of all, thank you so much for having me on. I've listened to your incredible podcast and been inspired by many of the female founders that you have had on already, talking about their huge companies and their many exits. I mean, I think what is culture to me is an interesting question, actually. I mean, I guess to me at the core, it's a community. It's kind of all the things I care about. Of course, it manifests itself in a physical printed product of a magazine. And we have a digital platform, of course. But I think it's a much more kind of personal thing to me. It's a much more meaningful kind of deep. It's not an object. It's not a magazine. It's all of these big ideas or these people or artists or curators or writers or poets or these people that I hold with such incredible revere. It's like this little pad for them, or this thing where I can capture what inspires me so much when I have the privilege of being with someone like that. And then it's a magazine. Then we kind of make it into content. But it certainly is all encompassing in my life, which I'm sure you hear from many founders, but it is something that I live and breathe on any given day.
I love that. Let's go back, Sarah, and talk a little bit about the mission of Culture and what you built to date. You are a fully profitable, I would say, cult-like following for anyone who touches design and art and culture. Tell us about the magazine and the place it fills in this world.
We're definitely known for supporting talented people, or, a lot of people come up to me and they say, you make me feel seen, or, kind of going against the trend. And I think that's changed a lot. We can talk about, the last 5 years in media or things like that. But when I started the magazine, I definitely set out to cover people that weren't being covered. I personally felt that I was kind of reading about the same people over and over again and their success stories. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. But I being such an avid reader of media, I was like, I read that 8 times. Now, of course, I know people don't log like that, but for me. And so I was like, wait a minute, here's this really fascinating young ceramicist who I know that these 3 people collect. And I know that this museum just purchased, but nobody else knows. They haven't been in kind of mainstream media yet. The mission was to capture that excitement that I was experiencing in my day of meeting these people, or getting to go to their studios, or just going to a museum and seeing a work that I'd never seen before and being like, what's that artist? And then going down and trying to do my own research. So I have so much enthusiasm for their stories. It was kind of like this way of me being like, I want everyone else to share my enthusiasm.
Sarah, let's talk a little bit about your starting out and building a brand. You built, as we said, a cult-like brand. You also have brands that advertise with you that are literally the best brands in the world, the Louis Vuitton, the Tiffany, many, many, many other hardest brands to actually get to want to be in company with you. How did you do that? Teach us your playbook for building a fabulous brand.
I mean, I did it really slowly, and I would say that I didn't actually set out to do that, which is I'm sure kind of different than many of your other founders, and this just was my path at that moment. But I kind of was like, I just want to do this really amazing work. And I think because of the time that I built it and the intersection of the art world and the fashion world, which of course have always been deeply intertwined, but me kind of slowly building this very authentic, art focused audience attracted the fashion world. So my goal when I started the magazine wasn't, I wouldn't have sat down with you and said, I want to get the best advertisers in the world. Of course, in retrospect, of course I did. But I have to say that for those first couple of years, my head was really down and I was really kind of like, I just want to tell the most interesting stories. I just want to get the most interesting people in the magazine. And then I think it kind of happened organically. And then once it started to happen, I think Cartier was one of the first and Louis Vuitton was maybe second. And then I was kind of like, that's when I learned a bit more about what these advertisers are looking for and what, audience means to them and access and having a cult like following, as you say, having really engaged readership. And so then, of course, I set forth to make it more of a priority, but I would say not until probably year 2 or 3.
I love that. And actually, just for everybody, what you just said was so important, which is you don't build an A+ brand focusing on building an A+ brand. You build a world-class A+ brand, building authentic, critical interest. In your lane here, it was the best content in the world, actually the right stories for art. And as a result, the influence follows, the brand follows. I think that is so well said. And of course, exactly how you build the best brand. I want to double click a little bit since obviously culture covers so much of art and fashion and influence, and you live at the epicenter of it. Can you talk a little bit about the predictions that you've seen of what's changing, what's trending? We're in this epic moment of AI and technology. What are you seeing from your perch that all of us should learn more about?
I mean, I think predictions are really hard. I actually love studying the moment. I think what magazines do well is capture the now. And so I'm always like obsessed with like, reading everything and when things change. And, I think we thought a little bit maybe a year or two ago about, when there was a rise of Substacks and, what that journalistic voice meant and the role that played. I think now, of course, with AI being the most important technology we'll see in our lifetimes, I presume, and from what I understand, like has been the most quickly adapted of any, and trying to see that, figuring out that relationship. I mean, early on, maybe about 8 months ago, I did hire an AI artist to create a fashion story, which was fascinating. And he obviously was kind of educating me through it. And then recently, AI technology has met with artists and they're kind of like both trying to study each other. And from what I understand, I've just assigned a story and was talking to one of our writers about it, that the experiment was so interesting, and that this technology learned so much from the artist's brain, and that artists really learned a lot from the technology, and I think there was a resulting show from that experiment, and so we're kind of looking into that. I mean, obviously it's incredibly powerful, but also figuring out, the obviously taking away the fear that art will go away because of AI. Like understanding its massive and immense power, but also still embracing, the hand and, obviously like the things that make the art world go round. So I think it's really interesting. I think that we're, with publications or, media like Puck, I think there's a real shift in how people consume content, how people read, the pace, the tone. In some level, like the internet, everyone wanted everything shorter. And then I think there was a return to like long form. And I feel like now we're in this like interesting moment of both, a little bit of like, okay, I either want to like go really deep or I just want like kind of something really voicey and, potentially a little gossipy or, I think we all have content fatigue. So I think looking at, the voices, really letting these amazing, whatever it might be, writers, critics, young voices. I just have hired a young girl named Delia Kai who has an incredible writing style, who's doing, like a how-to culture column. I've hired 2 art critics, John Vinkler and Joanna Fateman. So I think it's like, letting these voices, giving them a platform, whether it's long or short form, in which people react to, and just constantly seeing what people read and why they read it. And, we're all dealing with headlines. And, my friend called me the other day complaining about a headline saying this is the worst headline I've ever been written about. And I said, are you kidding? Everyone's going to click on that story. So, just finding the balance of what gets someone's attention, but what is like meaningful and something we really want to put forth. So it's a complicated time in media, but I also think it's an exciting time. I've heard the prediction a million times that magazines will go away. I don't subscribe to that because I just feel they have a place. And I watch young people, and the place that they have has changed anyway. I mean, it changed 30 years ago, it changed 20 years ago, it changed 10 years ago. I'm sure it'll change in another 10 years, but I don't think it'll go away. I think it's just finding your audience for each and what makes sense for what kind of story, what kind of visual, and why. But I think there's quite real spike in independent magazines. And, if you go to a newsstand at Casa Magazines or whatever, these stores are healthy. People are buying magazines. There's lots of magazines in them.
I agree with you. As somebody who picks up magazines, I particularly like to touch magazines, particularly fashion and design. I want to look at it, I want to see it, and I really enjoy feeling like I can save it. Sarah, I want to get your opinion on how is the art world evolving from your point of view?
The art world is getting bigger, for one. I think, because I didn't grow up in the art world, and a lot of people feel, and maybe quite rightly so, that the art world is about borders. It is about closed doors. And I think it's one of the things that I really was striving to break down, frankly, with the magazine. I mean, that was the other thing that was important to me. It was like there was, this world and this club, and I didn't grow up in it. My family wasn't in it. And I was fascinated by it. So one of the things that I've tried to do is break down the barriers in the art world as much as I can in terms of how I cover artists, how I cover collectors, things like that. I think the art world is constantly evolving. I think it's getting bigger. I think a lot of people, do want there to be more access. I think transparency is something we talk a lot about in the art world. When I started the magazine, and obviously digital wasn't as important when I started the magazine, but we cover art fairs a lot. And I started maybe 4 or 5 years ago, including prices in our coverage. So we'll say this painting sold for this amount, this sculpture sold for this amount, or whatever kind of thing. And I was surprised because the feedback that I got on those articles was mostly from other artists and artists trying to understand another market necessarily. So, transparency, support has been really important to me. I think the art world will continue with that trend of being more transparent. But it's like any of these big industries, they have their own rules and what works and what doesn't. But, I find it a fascinating world. And when you look at all the people that come together to make up the art world, you have a really interesting cross section of people just with that. With gallerists, with curators, with artists, with museum directors, with museum boards. You take all those people, you put them around a table, you have fascinating conversation. Obviously, I love seeing art all day long, but being around all of these kind of big thinkers and, what they say, art is the possibility to change how you feel. I mean, that's huge possibility to present and to wrap your head around. And I think it's just really inspiring.
I love that so much. As you think about the future of media and how it's evolving and what you're betting on, how would you answer that question?
Tough question. I mean, I'm betting on continued growth. I'm betting on what I've seen over the last couple years of culture. I'm betting on deepening my relationships. I'm betting on growing my database. I'm betting on continuing to tell stories that matter, that people remember, that people quote in other publications, that artists talk to me about. And I think, at least it's hard to look 20 years into the future, but I think for the next 5 years, I mean, there's certainly things that are important to me. And I certainly, obviously, like anyone, have markers of success. And some of them are financial. Some of them have nothing to do with money, So I think I find it an exciting time. I feel like there's lots of possibilities. We have grown a lot. We have more opportunities. I'm looking at drilling down into some of these other industries a bit more. We're looking at creating deeper relationships with the people who read the magazine, who interact with the magazine. And I think really just kind of building out our community in other cities and other countries. I mean, obviously we're, New York, LA, Paris, London, Mexico City. So these are kind of our big cities. But, I just did an event with Givenchy in Dallas and was pretty amazed. So many people came up to me and said, we love the magazine. How do we subscribe? We want to be a part of this magazine. There's a lot going on in Dallas. We really want you to come see our scene here. So I think there's continues to be kind of great potential for growth for everyone, not just for cultured, but for lots of media right now.
I appreciate that. I wanted to ask somebody that you want to give a shout out to?
Mm.
A human being that Cultured will write about, is writing about, just wrote about, that you think deserves a shout out and is doing something very interesting in this world. Who would that be, and tell us?
I could probably name like 15 people, but I will say that recently I was at a big event and I sat next to an actor named Andre Holland, who is playing Titus Kaphar, who's an amazing artist who's just done his first movie. And he's playing the artist in the film. And we ended up talking about his training, how he got into acting. He was saying that he's studying divinity at Harvard, and just someone who is like so in creating and so inspiring and inspired. And he actually did a reading with Arthur Jaffa that last Sunday night that I wanted to see. I would say he did. We just interviewed the writer who did the Diddy and Eve Babbitt's book, who's amazing. I mean, frankly, when people ask me what's the hardest thing, the only thing that's easy, in my opinion, that I do, the only thing that's easy is content. And I don't know if I love people, I'm inspired by people, but I feel like there's more people that I meet that I feel are deserving of a shout out on a podcast or recognition in the magazine than I can actually put in the magazine. I think we all meet famous people in our world or really successful people in our world. And we don't always meet the people who are doing unbelievable work, but haven't crossed over into the world of people knowing their name. And there's a lot of those people.
You literally took me to my next question, which is my job here, founder of Inspired, is to pick talent, to spot talent that we believe can be epic entrepreneurs. What you have done at Cultured is exactly that. You are incredibly good and have a huge track record of spotting talent. Tell us how you spot talent. What are your tricks?
I wish I had tricks. I have to say, I really don't have anything. It's like this feeling kind of that comes over me, or the way someone puts a sentence together, or the way someone is explaining how they use a paintbrush, or the way someone is talking about a conversation they had with a curator. To me, it's really this like feeling that I get from someone that's frankly, and it's like for me, it's instant. Like I'm like kind of like instantly inspired, and I really just kind of go with my gut. And a lot of times I don't put the pressure on myself of saying, is this person going to be famous in 10 years? I really don't think like that. I think more of like, I'm deeply inspired by this person right now. They're doing something unique, they're doing something interesting, and I want in, basically. And now looking back, I can say, yes, I have a great track record of spotting it. But in the moment, I'm never like, oh, what will their market be in 5 years? Or who's going to buy them? Or what, something like that. It's really just this feeling I get from their energy, their interest, their all of these kind of unidentifiable things that we all know about and can react to. So I feel very lucky to be around, frankly, a lot of people like that.
I love that. And we'll be right back after a message from our sponsors. Sarah, I want to transition a little bit to you.
Yep.
You, at your core, are an entrepreneur, which is why I'm happy to have you here today and have a very different type of entrepreneur on our podcast here. You grew up in New Jersey. You are almost in some ways an accidental entrepreneur, and you're a competitive horseback rider from young age. I always like to ask a question, which is if you think about your childhood and you think about today, was there anything that your parents did that kind of draws a straight line to setting you up for success for being a great entrepreneur?
I mean, I think for me, it was probably just both of my parents were entrepreneurs. Like my dad started his first company when he was 23 and started about two others, maybe three in his entire career. And my mom started her own company when she was about 35 or so, not having worked before that. So I kind of had this blueprint of watching, and it's funny because like it didn't hit me, and I never like was like when I was studying or my first 10 years of my career working for other people, I never was like, I want to be an entrepreneur. But if I look back now, I can kind of see, the passion and the hard work that they both had for what they did. And it was inspiring to see. And I think it probably planted a seed in me that was like, I want to be that passionate about my business. I can work that hard. And they did. They both worked incredibly, incredibly hard. And I think seeing that was just inspiring.
One thing I'm pretty inspired by with you, which is you inherently position and juggle two things. You manage the creative side of the business, which is literally, quite literally, creatives, content creation, visuals, what you want to cover, spotting the talent. and the business side. Those are two very different parts of a brain. How do you juggle that?
I mean, I think that I have worked my business side muscle up. I would say it was definitely lacking when I started. I guess I'm always going to be led by the creative first, which I think is a good balance because obviously, you have to stay in business. You have to support what you're doing. And I feel pretty lucky. I don't have to make that many hard decisions because I have such great advertisers. So as you said, a lot of the people who support the magazine are the people that we would cover, or the people who understand what we're doing or are attracted to how we cover something creatively. But I do think growing the business, it is a different brain and it is hard, but also equally inspiring. So I think it's just kind of like trying to like balance everything and make sure that like I'm not sacrificing. I mean, I think, we all sacrifice. I think everybody has to sacrifice. But I think that's what I kind of think about most if I come to make a decision about something. It's kind of like, am I sacrificing any creativity here? And I really haven't been in that position. I think it's more of just understanding what it takes to build the business side and that there's way more to building a business than just getting advertising dollars. I think that was one of my earlier mistakes is thinking, good content is enough. I actually don't think it's enough anymore.
No, I hear you loud and clear on that. You've said before, which I think I am similarly wired the way that you are, which is you're someone who leads with your gut. Tell us more about that. What does that mean to you?
I mean, I think it's just like I have to feel comfortable doing things. And a lot of times, sometimes I like it kind of has to come even from me for me to feel good about it. And I think I'm at a point, and I'm sure you are too, at this stage where I do trust my gut. I mean, I would say in work, I trust my gut. Often in other situations, I'm like, I have no idea what to do. I don't know if you've ever seen that meme, which is like, I'm 18, don't tell me how to do anything. And then it's like, I'm 40. Well, I'm not 40, but I'm 40. Please tell me, give me any opinion. Like, just tell me anything what I should do here. Like, life is so overwhelming with like business and kids and marriage and everything. It's like, just tell me what to do. But I think with Cultured, I feel like I know my boundaries, I know my whatever, and I feel very comfortable with making decisions on my gut. I love listening to other people. I do ask people in my trusted universe for opinions all the time. I think it's really important to listen. I think that's one of the other skills that I've done in growing the business is listen to people. I really try hard, although I'm sure you can understand, not to be defensive. If someone doesn't like what you're doing, I'm always curious. I want to understand. At the end of the day, you're never, ever going to please everybody. And I think that's good. I think that's really good. I think you shouldn't. But listening to those people, I think is important. So I feel good in my gut in my work. I think motherhood sometimes has stumped me a bit more.
Yeah, I think that's well said, actually. Okay, I'm going to move to the quick fire rounds. What do you like to ask people when you're getting to know them in an interview? And it can be someone you're sitting next to at dinner, but what's a question you like to ask?
I always ask people about how they grew up. I'm always interested in their mom and dad. I'm always interested in where and their family structure. Not for the magazine, but for me personally, that is always I'm so curious. Tell me about where you grew up. It's my first question for sure.
Oh my God, I'm smiling just because I also love that so much. What is a quote you live by? What's a quote that you just deeply believe in?
I think I have many quotes. I think one of the quotes that I live by or I think about a lot is, and I may not quote it perfectly, but Joan Didion's line in her 2005 Year of Magical Thinking, life changes in an instant, in an ordinary instant. And I think about that quote a lot because it's so true, right?
Yeah.
And I think that in life, it's very easy to get caught up. We're busy people. We have all these things. And it kind of grounds me when I think about it, to think about like, it's all fleeting, and it all could change in a minute. And like, I know you share with me, we work such intense hours. And sometimes you can get a little bit like blinders or a little bit foggy and kind of just like so deep in your work that you need. When I think about that quote, it kind of pulls me out and it makes me kind of look at my life in a little bit more like, from a bird's eye view, or just focus on what really matters and don't take anything for granted.
I deeply agree with you. I think most of us will. Last two questions. Name three artists we should just know about. Three names, first that come to your mind.
Right now that are coming to my mind, I would say Rashid Johnson, Titus Kafour, and Avery Singer.
Amazing. I love it. And then, because I have to ask this, because it's just such a fun one, which is you get one pinch me moment since you founded Cultured. What is it?
My pinch me moment is kind of weird. Okay, so my pinch me moment was Zadie Smith in the New Yorker, in her profile of Henry Taylor, quoted our article in Cultured.
I love it. That makes me so happy. That is so awesome. Everybody out there, first of all, Sarah, thank you so much for joining us today. Guys, if you want to learn more, please check out culturedmag.com. Sarah, you are so fun. It has been so fun getting to know you. You are just magnetic, and I deeply understand why you are so talented at what you do. And everybody out there, you can join us for a new episode of For Starters with Lex Von Tobel next week. Sarah, we're wishing you all of the best of luck and rooting for you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me on.